Pay our debt or get out. Lily's voice cracked the silence like a whip across my spine. She stood at the foot of the stairs, fists clenched, eyes wild, like I was some squatter, not her father. Behind her, Dean leaned against the wall, arms folded, smug and silent. I had just offered to cover their gas bill, not expecting to be ambushed. "We're drowning because of you," she spat. "I built this house. Raised her in it. Buried my wife here. And now I was being told I didn't belong." My hands shook as I set down my tea. "Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below." I still remember the first time I held Lily. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine like I was the only thing anchoring her to this world. Marjorie had just passed, hours after giving birth. A clot. Sudden. Unforgiving. The nurse placed Lily in my arms and whispered, "She needs you now." And that was it. My whole life, redefined in a single sentence. I wasn't ready. No man is, especially not when grief and fatherhood arrive on the same day. But I did what I could. Worked long shifts at the factory, sometimes doubles, just to afford formula and doctor visits. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom house my father left me. Drafty in the winter. Roof leaked every spring. But it was ours. Marjorie's photos hung on every wall. I talked to them more than I care to admit. Asked for advice on everything: teething, schooling, boys. Lily would sit on the kitchen floor, banging pots together, while I cooked scrambled eggs and read the paper. She called me Papa, long past the age most kids drop it for Dad. I held on to that like a lifeline. She was bright. Curious. Loved books more than toys. When I couldn't afford summer camps, I made up our own, Papa's Adventure Days. We'd explore old train yards, collect pebbles, build birdhouses. One summer, she made a scrapbook of our expeditions, and gave it to me for Father's Day. I still have it, tucked away in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Page 3 has a crayon drawing of us fishing, my nose too big, her smile too wide. It's perfect. When she turned 10, I started saving for college. Every paycheck, I'd pull $50 before groceries and tuck it into a jar labeled Lily's Wings. She never asked for much, but I wanted her to have choices, the kind Marjorie and I never had. High school came, and she blossomed. Straight A's, theater club, student council. She'd stay up late working on speeches, and I'd pretend to be asleep just so she'd feel independent. But I always waited up. Listened for her footsteps. Made sure she locked the door. Then came Dean. He was charming at first. Wore cologne that was a bit too strong and used words like synergy and equity like he invented them. But Lily was smitten. Said he made her feel seen. I didn't know what that meant, I saw her every day. But I kept quiet. That's what fathers do. We trust, even when something inside us whispers otherwise. They married young, just 22. I gave them the house. Signed the deed over as a wedding gift. It's time this place sees new memories, I told them, choking back whatever doubt lingered in my gut. Dean hugged me stiffly. Lily cried. Said I was the best man she'd ever known. I moved into the in-law suite out back. Still close, but out of the way. You'll always have your space, she promised. I believed her. For a while, things were good. They had 2 kids, Emma and Caleb. I'd babysit, make pancakes, read bedtime stories. Emma loved hearing about Marjorie. She'd say, "Tell me about Grandma Em again," and I'd describe how Marjorie danced barefoot in the kitchen or sang lullabies off-key just to make Lily laugh. We had Sunday dinners, birthdays, backyard movie nights. Dean even asked me for business advice once, said he admired my work ethic. I was proud. Genuinely proud. But slowly, things began to shift. First, Dean lost his job. Then came the loans. Just until we get back on our feet, Lily said, sliding papers across the table. I signed without reading. Of course I did. They were my kids. Then came whispers of bigger ambitions. Dean wanted to scale up. Said they were trapped in the house. I reminded him that trapped is better than homeless. He didn't laugh. Still, I kept helping. Paid off a credit card. Bought them a new fridge. Watched the kids every time they needed space. I told myself it was temporary. That loyalty would bring things full circle. Looking back, maybe I just didn't want to admit the truth. The girl who used to dance barefoot in the living room was slowly becoming someone I didn't recognize. She stopped visiting the garden where we buried Marjorie's ashes. The swing I built for her own kids sat rusting. She stopped calling me Papa. I'd hear her scolding Emma, "Don't go bug Grandpa. He needs rest." But I didn't need rest. I needed connection. I needed her to remember who I was. But I said nothing. I smiled through it. I told myself families go through phases. One night, I stood by the kitchen window and watched Dean and Lily laugh on the porch. Their laughter was sharp, clipped. Different. I tried to join them, offered to bring out tea. Dean looked at me like I'd interrupted a meeting. Lily waved me off. "It's adult stuff, Dad. You wouldn't get it." That stung. But I went back inside. Boiled the kettle anyway. Sat at the table alone, 2 cups steeping. And in that moment, with the steam rising, the porch light flickering, and the sound of laughter outside that didn't include me, I realized something had shifted. Not overnight. But over years. Love had turned into expectation. Gratitude into entitlement. And me? I'd gone from father, to wallet, to burden. It started with interruptions. Little ones, at first, Lily cutting me off mid-sentence when I tried to tell a story at dinner, Dean pretending to take phone calls whenever I walked into the room. I'd laugh it off, chalk it up to busy lives, the buzz of adulthood. But deep down, I felt it. The distance. The unspoken shift. I'd spent decades creating a home filled with patience, warmth, and routine. But now, I felt like a guest in my own space. "Papa, can we talk later?" she asked once, not looking up from her laptop. I was holding an old photo of her and Marjorie at the lake, wanting to share a memory. She didn't even glance. "Later," she said. But later never came. Then came the financial nudges. Dean would drop hints over breakfast, "This inflation is killing us," or, "Man, preschool tuition's highway robbery." I'd offer help, just a little, but it stopped being voluntary. They'd leave bills out on the counter. Accidentally. Credit card statements, overdue notices, late mortgage letters. All placed neatly in my line of sight. One time I found a collection letter tucked into the fridge behind the milk. I knew what they were doing. And still. I helped. I paid their electric bill once, then twice, then monthly. At first, Lily acted grateful. Hugged me tightly, said, "You're saving us, Papa." But the hugs stopped when the money became expected. Dean stopped thanking me altogether. Then, one day, I realized I no longer had access to the shared bank account, the one we set up when I transferred the house to them. I brought it up gently over lunch. "Just streamlined it," Dean said casually, chewing a sandwich. "Too many hands in one pot, you know." Lily didn't even look at me. She just nodded. "It's easier this way, Dad." I nodded too, though my stomach turned. They had stopped seeing me as a partner. I was now the safety net they walked all over. Still, I told myself, this is what parents do. We support. We forgive. We hope. But the small cracks widened. Dean began locking the thermostat, literally. Bought some smart gadget he controlled from his phone. I'd wake up shivering, knock on the door to ask for heat, and he'd say, "It's set to conserve." We're being responsible. Responsible? I built that house. Paid the bills for 30 years. And now I needed permission to stay warm? Then came the guest room change. One afternoon, I returned from a short walk and found Caleb's toys scattered in my in-law suite. My bed had been moved, my closet emptied. We needed more space for the kids, Lily said flatly. You'll sleep on the pullout in the den for now. I wanted to ask, since when is this your decision? But I bit my tongue. Swallowed the words. They were all I had left. I stayed quiet. 4 weeks. Just watched. Watched Dean order things online, expensive, flashy things. A new grill, a smartwatch, designer shoes. He'd say, "It's an investment," while I quietly bought my clothes from the discount rack and fixed a hole in my sock with thread. Watched Lily spend hours on her phone, laughing at TikToks while ignoring her children, who sat in front of glowing screens, hungry for attention. Watched my grandkids forget how to say, please, or thank you. Watched myself disappear, inch by inch, from their lives. Even the garden changed. Marjorie's roses used to bloom there every spring. I tended them like they were sacred. But Dean wanted to modernize the backyard. Tore up the beds, poured gravel over the soil, and built a fire pit no one ever used. I stood in the window the day the rose bushes were ripped out. One root clung stubbornly to the earth. The man with the shovel kicked it until it snapped. I said nothing. Because by then, I'd learned what happened when I spoke up. Dean would make a snide remark, like, "Maybe you're not adjusting well to change." Lily would sigh and walk out of the room, leaving a silence heavier than any words. So I adjusted. I learned to live smaller. Quieter. Took walks alone. Ate dinner in the den. Talked to Marjorie's picture in whispers instead of full voice. But inside, something was shifting. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter. More dangerous. Clarity. The kind that creeps in slowly. The kind you can't ignore once it takes root. One evening, I overheard Dean on the phone. His voice was sharp, urgent. He thought I was asleep. "No, we're good. My old man's still here. Yeah, still paying. Honestly, I think we can squeeze a few more months out of him." That word. Squeeze. I don't remember sitting down. I just remember the kettle boiling dry behind me, the smell of burnt metal filling the kitchen. The next morning, Lily made me toast like nothing had happened. Asked if I could cover daycare for a week. Smiled like everything was normal. And I looked at her, really looked, and saw it for the first time. She no longer saw me as her father. I was a utility. A line item on her budget. A tired, old man with just enough left in him to milk dry. That was the morning I stopped answering to Dad. I started watching. Really watching. Because something inside me, something older than pain, deeper than sadness, had begun to wake up. It was Caleb's 7th birthday. The backyard was strung with plastic streamers, mismatched balloons, and a rented bounce house that swallowed the garden Marjorie once adored. Her lavender bushes had been trampled under folding chairs. The fire pit was lit for no reason. It was a blistering August afternoon. Still, I tried to be cheerful. I wore the silly paper hat, helped carry out the juice boxes, even led a game of pin the tail, before Dean shooed me away with a laugh. "All right, Grandpa's done his duty." I didn't argue. I just nodded and stepped back, finding shade near the fence. That's when it happened. Dean stood on the little deck, beer in one hand, cake knife in the other, gathering everyone's attention. Neighbors, a few co-workers, Lily's old college friend, all crowded around, smiling, phones in hand. "And now," he said, grinning, "a toast. To the man who's really made this day possible." My heart fluttered. For a brief moment, I thought he meant me. I stood a little straighter, even smiled. Dean raised his can and pointed at me. "Let's hear it for the guy who's kept our lights on, our fridge full, and our mortgage just barely out of collections. Good ol' Walter." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. I froze. Dean wasn't finished. "Seriously, though," he added, "it's good to have a talking bailout plan, right?" More laughter. "I mean, I didn't know retirement came with a co-signing bonus." Someone clapped. Someone else whistled. I stood there, paralyzed. Still smiling, but only because I didn't know what else to do. Then I saw Lily. She wasn't laughing. But she wasn't stopping it either. She stood by the drink table, arms crossed, staring at the ground like a child caught cheating on a test. She didn't look at me once. My face burned. Not from the sun. From shame. From disbelief. I turned and walked inside, slowly. No one followed. Not even my grandchildren. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, gripping it hard enough to whiten my knuckles. The air smelled of frosting and cheap beer. I stared at the photo on the fridge, a picture of Marjorie holding Lily at age 5, both smiling in the garden. I remember that day. I'd built a small swing from an old tire, and Lily had insisted Marjorie try it. She laughed, really laughed, as Lily pushed her gently, the sun painting her hair gold. We were happy. Whole. Now, her garden was gone. Her daughter unrecognizable. And me? I was a punchline. That night, after the guests left and the kids were tucked in, I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to sip tea. My hands shook too much to hold the cup steady. Lily came in, wearing pajamas, scrolling her phone. She looked up, surprised to see me still there. "Oh. You okay?" I didn't respond. Just looked at her. Waited. She hesitated, then added, "Dean didn't mean anything by it. He was just being playful." "Is that what that was?" I asked, my voice quiet. She shrugged. "He was trying to be funny. You know how he is." "I do," I said. "But I thought I knew you better." That stung her. I could see it. But she didn't apologize. Instead, she muttered, "You're taking this way too seriously, Dad. Nobody meant to embarrass you." I was humiliated, I said. My voice cracked then, and I hated myself for it. Lily sighed, impatient. "Look, we're all stressed. Things are tight. Dean's working double hours, I'm trying to manage the kids, and you're living here rent-free. Can't we all just give each other a little grace? Rent-free." That phrase landed like a slap. After everything I'd paid, financially, emotionally, physically, I was now the freeloader. I didn't respond. I simply stood up, rinsed my untouched tea, and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling all night, listening to the muffled sound of the TV in their room, the ticking clock, the slow realization that this wasn't an accident. This was who she had become. And I had let it happen. I thought of the times I'd protected her, shielding her from bullies, comforting her after breakups, helping her fill out college applications late at night while making grilled cheese and hot cocoa. I thought of Marjorie, and how she once said, "The way we raise her now will echo for decades." I'd raised her with love, yes. But maybe also too much shelter. Too much lenience. And now that love was being weaponized against me, bent into guilt, reshaped into obligation. The next morning, no one said a word. I made breakfast for myself, toast and a boiled egg, and sat outside on the little bench by the shed. Alone. Dean left for work without a glance. Lily ushered the kids into the car for school. She paused at the door, as if she might say something. But she didn't. Just walked out. That silence hurt more than Dean's speech. Because at least his mockery was honest. Lily's indifference, that was betrayal. It happened on a Wednesday morning, the kind of gray, forgettable day where nothing is supposed to change. The kids were at school, Dean had left early, and Lily was on the phone in the kitchen. I usually kept to myself during her calls, but that morning I'd forgotten my reading glasses on the counter. As I reached for them, I heard her say it. He won't notice. He trusts me too much. I've got the paperwork ready, Dean just needs to print the last signature page. I froze. Yeah, she continued. He'll just think it's another refinance. We'll take care of the debt and finally get some breathing room. Worst case? We move him out. Legally, the house is still ours. Move me out? I didn't breathe. My hand hovered above the counter, inches from my glasses. I don't think he even checks his mail anymore, she added, her voice low and dismissive. And if he does, he's too proud to admit he doesn't understand most of it. She laughed. She laughed. I quietly backed out of the room, heart pounding like I'd run a mile. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding those stupid glasses like they were evidence in a trial. And in a way, they were. Up until then, I had blamed Dean for the worst of it. I told myself Lily was just caught in the tide, swept along by his ambition, trying to keep the family afloat. But now I knew better. She wasn't just complicit. She was the architect. That night, when the house was quiet and the dishwasher hummed its usual tune, I walked back into the kitchen. I opened the junk drawer, the one she never let the kids touch, and found a stack of documents tucked beneath expired coupons. Loan applications. Credit inquiries. A new mortgage offer. All with my name on them. One had my signature at the bottom. Only, it wasn't mine. It looked like mine. A shaky imitation, passable at a glance. But I knew my own hand. And I had never signed a line authorizing a second mortgage against my own house. I sat at the table, papers spread before me, hands trembling. That's when I heard the floor creak. A footstep behind me. I turned. Emma. She stood in the doorway, holding a glass of water, blinking sleepily. What are you doing up, pumpkin? I whispered. She shrugged. Heard noises. I nodded. Go back to bed, sweetheart. Everything's okay. But it wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time. After she patted away, I stared at the documents again. My name, being used like a checkbook. Like I didn't matter. Later, I pulled out the small cedar box from my closet. The one Marjorie had given me the Christmas before she passed. Inside were the old photos, her last letter, and the original deed to the house, signed over to Lily and Dean, yes, but with a clause, occupancy rights reserved in perpetuity for Walter J. Hill. I had forgotten that part. Marjorie insisted on it. Just in case, she said. That was her way, gentle preparation wrapped in love. She always saw 2 steps ahead. I closed the box, hands steadier now. I needed answers. I needed a plan. And I needed to stop hoping they'd come to their senses. The next few days, I pretended nothing was wrong. I nodded when Dean asked for help with the Wi-Fi. I smiled when Lily asked if I'd pick up the kids from school. I even helped Emma build a cardboard fort in the den, her little hands cutting windows, giggling like life was still whole. But I watched everything. I noticed Lily whispering more. Not just to Dean, but to people on her phone. People she hung up on quickly when I entered the room. I noticed mail disappearing faster, and the filing cabinet in the hallway locked one day when it never had been before. I found their printer tray filled with unsigned forms. Financial ones. I started copying them. Quietly. Every time they left the house. I bought a flash drive and stored digital photos of the forged signatures, the new mortgage proposal, the timeline of when they planned to finalize the transfer. Because they didn't plan to just move me out. They planned to take everything. It wasn't neglect anymore. It was a scheme. And something inside me shifted. The sadness that had weighed me down for months began to solidify. Harden. I remembered Marjorie's face the day we brought Lily home, the way she looked at her like she was made of stardust and second chances. She always said, "She's our legacy." Now that legacy was poisoning our home. That night, I walked the halls alone, touching each doorframe. The one I installed when Lily scraped her shoulder riding her first bike. The corner where Marjorie leaned while humming lullabies. The spot near the pantry where I once carved a secret heart with our initials. This house held our story. And I would not let it become their prize. I pulled out the deed again. Reread the clause. Reread it 3 times. Then I picked up the phone. Not to call Lily. Not to argue or plead. I called Mr. Simmons, a retired notary and longtime friend from the factory. "I need a lawyer," I said, my voice steady. There was a long pause on the other end. "Everything all right, Walt?" "No," I said. "But it will be. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments." I waited 2 more days. Not because I was afraid. Not anymore. But because I wanted to see if they'd give me even a sliver of truth. A scrap of honesty. One look in the eye that said, "We know what we're doing is wrong." But it never came. On Thursday morning, I sat across from Lily at the kitchen table. The air smelled like burnt toast and citrus cleaner. She was scrolling through her phone, barely aware of my presence. I watched her for a long time before speaking. "You forged my signature," I said. She blinked, looked up, and for just a flash, I saw it. Guilt. Panic. Then it vanished. "What are you talking about?" she asked, too quickly. "I saw the mortgage forms," I said. "The ones with my name scribbled on the bottom." "My name. Not my writing." She leaned back, arms crossed. "Dad, you're misunderstanding." "Am I?" I interrupted. "You were on the phone in the kitchen. I heard everything. You and Dean, planning to refinance the house." "My house." She didn't speak. Her jaw tensed, her foot tapped beneath the table. She wasn't surprised. She was calculating. Finally, she said, "We needed help. The debt is crushing us. We didn't know what else to do." "You could have asked," I said. "You could have spoken to me like a daughter speaks to her father. But instead, you chose to steal." "Don't be dramatic," she snapped. "It's not stealing. It's survival. We live here too. We've been taking care of you, remember?" I laughed, bitter and short. "Taking care of me? By locking the thermostat? By feeding me once a week and using my pension to cover your credit cards?" She stood, angry now. "You don't understand how hard it is for us. We have 2 kids, Dad. We're drowning. You live here rent-free. You don't contribute anything anymore." I rose too. Slowly. "I gave you everything. This house. Your education. Years of my life." My voice trembled, but not from fear. From the effort of keeping my fury contained. "And you treat me like furniture you're trying to move into storage." She rolled her eyes, muttering, "Here we go." I stared at her then. Not as my daughter. But as a stranger. A woman I didn't recognize. You've lost your way, I said. And one day, when your children see how you treat your father, they'll remember. She flinched, just slightly. Then she said, "You're blowing this out of proportion. We'll figure it out. Don't make things harder than they need to be." "I'm not the one who made it hard," I said. "But I am done pretending." She stormed out of the room, muttering under her breath. I didn't follow. That night, Dean came home with beer on his breath and arrogance in his stride. Lily must have told him everything because he didn't bother with pleasantries. He dropped his keys, leaned against the doorframe, and said, "So what's your play, old man? Gonna call the cops on your own daughter?" I looked up from my book. Calm. "No," I said. "But I did call a lawyer." He snorted. "What lawyer? You've got, what, $100 to your name?" I didn't respond. I just smiled, the kind of quiet, controlled smile that unsettles the cocky. "You think anyone's going to take your side?" he pressed. "You're practically senile. No judge will believe you over us." "I have recordings," I said, folding my page. "Documents. Originals and copies. And the deed still grants me occupancy rights, in perpetuity." That shut him up. He stared at me for a long second, then scoffed. "You're bluffing." I didn't reply. And in that silence, he realized I wasn't. The next morning, he avoided me. Lily wouldn't look me in the eye. But something had changed, I had changed. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was observing. Planning. Strengthening. I took walks with Mr. Simmons, who introduced me to a trust attorney in town. A soft-spoken woman named Grace who'd handled elder abuse cases. She listened carefully, took notes, and reassured me, "You're not crazy. You're being manipulated. But we can make it stop." We filed paperwork. Pulled credit reports. Opened a new account. Moved my pension and savings. Locked them out. Grace helped me draft a new will. My hands shook as I signed it, but not from regret. From relief. Lily and Dean were removed as beneficiaries. Instead, I left the house in trust to a local shelter that housed homeless veterans. I added one clause: if either of them contested the will, everything would go to the charity. No loopholes. No back doors. No forgiveness. That night, I sat on the back step, looking out over the lawn. The swing was gone. The garden was gravel. The laughter of those early years had long since vanished. But in the stillness, I could hear Marjorie's voice again. "You did your best," she would have said. And I did. But now, I had to do better. Not for them. For me. Grace's office was tucked between a florist and a shoe repair shop, the kind of modest little place that didn't scream "lawyer," and that suited me just fine. I didn't want drama. I didn't want attention. I wanted peace. Quiet, ironclad peace. She greeted me with a warm nod. No handshake. She seemed to understand that some people, especially the older ones like me, needed a little space these days. Her office smelled like lemon oil and paper, clean, unpretentious. "Ready to finalize it?" she asked, sliding a crisp stack of papers across the desk. I nodded, though a weight pressed against my chest. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled the pen from its cradle. The pen felt heavier than it should have. The document was simple, cleaner than the original will Marjorie and I had signed back in '95. That one had gone on for pages. This one was 6 pages, with clear terms. Lily and Dean removed as heirs. House transferred to the Marjorie Hill Home for Veterans, pending my death or voluntary vacating. Pension and savings placed in a trust for the shelter. A no-contest clause: if any named or removed family member tried to challenge the will in court, all assets would immediately and permanently go to the charity, no exceptions, no appeals. I signed on the last line, my hand steadier than I expected. As the ink dried, Grace said softly, "This is going to hurt them." "I know," I replied. "But they were more than willing to hurt me." She said nothing, just notarized the file and slipped it into a locked drawer. When I stepped out into the street, the air felt different. Cooler. Calmer. As though a storm had passed, even if the sky still looked heavy with clouds. I walked 3 blocks to the shelter I'd driven by so many times before. I'd never actually gone inside. Just watched it from the outside, a pale brick building with a sagging sign and a small garden out front, tended mostly by volunteers. It wasn't much. But it was honest. One of the coordinators, a man named Russ, gave me a short tour. "We do what we can," he said, "but space is tight. We've had to turn away 5 veterans this month alone." I asked him what they needed most. "Beds," he said. "But more than that?" "Dignity." I nodded. I knew that word intimately. What it felt like to have it. And what it felt like to have it slowly eroded, piece by piece. Before I left, I handed him my card, just a simple note with my name and number. "If things go the way I think they will," I told him, "I'll have something for you soon." He didn't ask questions. Just shook my hand. When I got home, I found Lily and Dean sitting at the kitchen table, side by side, like a united front. Dean spoke first. "So we noticed the accounts are locked now." I set my keys on the counter, calm as ever. "That's right." Lily looked up, her face tight. "You don't trust us anymore?" "I trusted you too much," I replied. Dean scoffed. "We've supported you for years." "You've lived off me for years," I snapped, sharper than I intended. But I didn't apologize. Lily leaned forward. "We're family, Dad. Families help each other." I met her gaze. "And family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't scheme behind closed doors." She blinked, her lip trembling slightly. "We were desperate." "No," I said quietly. "You were greedy." She opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "It's done. The papers are signed. The accounts are secure. I've rewritten my will." Dean's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" I turned to him. "You heard me. Everything is spoken for. If either of you challenge it, even once, it all goes to charity. Every penny." He went pale. His arrogance drained like water down a sink. Lily stood abruptly. "You can't just cut us out of your life like that. We're your family." I looked at her, really looked, and realized how far we'd drifted. "I didn't cut you out," I said. "You walked away a long time ago." She covered her face with her hands. Whether it was shame or frustration, I couldn't tell. Dean stood up too, muttering, "Unbelievable. You'd rather give it all to strangers than your own daughter." I stared at him, unblinking. "I'd rather give it to people who need it. Who respect it. Who would never use love as leverage." He didn't reply. Neither did Lily. They just stood there, stunned, like the roof had suddenly vanished and they were exposed to the elements. I walked past them without another word, climbed the stairs to my room, my real room, and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, facing the photo of Marjorie that had remained on my dresser for 30 years. "We did everything we could," I whispered. "And now? I'm doing what's right." I reached into the drawer and took out the letter she wrote me the week before she passed, the one she told me not to open until the time was right. It was short. Just a few lines. "If the house ever becomes heavy, let it go. It was always meant to be a shelter, not a burden. I trust you to know the difference." I folded it slowly, tears in my eyes. Because she had always seen what I refused to. The final act came sooner than I expected. 3 days after I changed the will, a letter arrived, hand-delivered in a crisp white envelope with no return address. It was from a real estate agency, not one I recognized. Inside was a formal notice stating that the property located at 54 Bellington Lane has been listed for immediate sale per the homeowner's request. My hands went cold. I read it again. And again. My name wasn't on it. Just Lily and Dean's. It wasn't a warning. It was a move. I walked into the kitchen, letter in hand, heart pounding in a strange, controlled rhythm, like the sound of rain before a storm. Dean sat at the table, feet up, chewing a slice of cold pizza like nothing was wrong in the world. "Why is the house listed for sale?" I asked, voice low. He didn't look up. "It's time we move on. Better neighborhood, better schools. Closer to Dean's new job," he added, like he was reading from a brochure. I waited. Lily came in next, holding a laundry basket. She didn't meet my eyes. "We figured it's time. Things have been tense, and honestly, it's not good for the kids." "You figured?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. She sighed. "Dad, we own the house. It's in our name. And frankly, this arrangement isn't working. You've made that clear. Where exactly do you expect me to go?" Dean finally looked at me, that smug grin crawling across his face. "There's always the senior center. Or maybe one of your army buddies can take you in. You've got options." Options. That word sat in my mouth like vinegar. I turned without another word, went back to my room, and closed the door. Not to hide. To gather. I opened the bottom drawer, pulled out the file folder where I'd stored everything, the new will, the forged documents, the notary records, the deed clause. Everything I'd need for the confrontation. Then I opened the closet, took down the duffel bag I'd used during my service years, and began packing. Not clothes. Evidence. Marjorie's letter. The flash drive. Copies of bank statements and the forged forms. I placed them carefully between layers of newspaper. I added my father's watch. The one he gave me when I turned 18, and he told me, a man's time matters more than his money. Spend it wisely. I zipped the bag slowly, the sound loud in the silence. That evening, I sat on the porch alone. The breeze was heavy with the scent of early autumn, dried leaves and dying grass. The fire pit Dean never used sat cold and abandoned. The gravel crunched beneath the occasional step of a squirrel or the wind itself. I stared at the swing set. One of the chains was broken now. No one had fixed it. That's how it always happened, I realized. Things broke, and no one bothered to fix them. Not the swing. Not the home. Not us. Lily came out just before sundown, arms crossed. "You're not going to make a scene, are you?" I looked at her. She shifted uncomfortably. "The house hasn't sold yet," she added. "But we've got viewings lined up. We'll help you pack once we have a buyer." I stood. The duffel bag was already at my feet. "No need," I said. "I'll be gone before then." She looked relieved. Almost too relieved. But I wasn't going far. That night, I stayed with George, an old friend from my factory days who now lived in a retirement duplex across town. He didn't ask questions. Just pointed to the spare bed and said, "You want coffee or silence?" "Silence," I whispered. The next morning, I got both. The lawyer, Grace, helped me prepare one last set of documents. I had a plan. I had the truth. And I had one last thing they didn't expect. Dignity. By Friday, they were planning Caleb's birthday again. Another backyard event, another day of pretenses. And I would be there. Not as a guest. But as a witness. To everything they tried to hide. I dressed in my best, clean shirt, pressed trousers, the same jacket I wore to Marjorie's funeral. Not because I wanted to grieve, but because today was, in its own way, a burial. Not of a person, but of a false narrative. As I approached the house, I saw the balloons again, the same forced smiles, the folding chairs set out over dead grass. Dean stood by the grill, holding court. Lily arranged snacks with robotic precision. They didn't see me at first. Not until I reached the edge of the yard and set my bag on the ground. Lily froze. Dean's smile dropped. A few guests turned to look. A hush fell like a slow curtain. "Afternoon," I said. "Calm. Clear." Dean stepped forward. "What are you doing here?" I unzipped the bag and pulled out the manila folder. Something I should have done a long time ago. I handed the top document to Lily. Her hands trembled as she read it. Dean tried to grab it. I pulled another copy and held it up. Forgery. Financial exploitation. Illegal property listing. All documented. All notarized. Someone gasped. Dean stammered, "You can't prove." "I don't have to," I said. "The burden of proof now falls on you." Lily was pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came. I turned to the guests. "My name is Walter Hill. I built this house. Raised my daughter here. Paid every bill, fixed every pipe, and buried my wife in this soil. And today, I'm letting you all know that this chapter is closed." I turned to Lily once more. "I won't be threatened. I won't be stolen from. And I won't be silenced." Then I picked up my bag and walked away. Not out of defeat, but toward justice. It had been 1 week since I walked away from the house I built with my bare hands. 7 days since I dropped those documents into Dean's trembling hands and watched the truth hang in the air like smoke. I hadn't heard a word from them since. Not a phone call. Not a knock at the door. Just silence. But the town? Oh, the town was talking. The birthday guests couldn't keep it to themselves. The story twisted and turned through every cafe, barbershop, and church bench. Some said I sued them, others that I kicked them out in the middle of the party. One woman at the pharmacy said I burned the deed in front of them like some wild movie ending. None of that was true. The truth was quieter, and louder, in its own way. They'd been exposed. And now, the final step would be mine. Lily and Dean were still in the house. That much I knew. But the lawyer had filed the necessary petitions. The fraudulent refinance was dead in the water. The sale listing had been pulled. And Grace had filed an injunction to protect my occupancy rights while we finalized the transfer of title. All that was left was one last visit. I chose Sunday. The same day we used to have pancakes together in the kitchen, when Lily was 10 and still wore pigtails and giggled about silly dreams. I didn't bring a bag this time. Just an envelope. When I rang the bell, Dean answered. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept. Or shaved. Or won an argument all week. "Walter," he muttered. "Is Lily home?" He stepped aside without another word. The house smelled different, not bad, just vacant. Like no one had bothered to care for it in days. Boxes lined the hallway. The swing set had been dismantled. I stepped over a pile of clothes and walked into the living room. Lily sat on the couch. Alone. No TV. No phone. Just sitting. She looked up at me, startled. Then tired. Then nothing. "You came back," she said softly. "I never left," I replied. We sat in silence for a few long moments. Then I placed the envelope on the coffee table. "What's this?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Final notice. I'm transferring the property. The shelter board approved everything. You'll have 30 days to vacate. She stared at it, then at me. You're really doing this? Yes. She nodded slowly. Even after everything we've been through. After all we gave you. I leaned forward. You gave me nothing I didn't give first. And you didn't give it in love, you gave it in expectation. Her lip quivered. Was it really that bad? She asked. Did we really deserve this? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked around the room, at the scratched floorboards, the half-packed boxes, the quiet hum of a house already saying goodbye. You told me to pay your debt or get out, I said. And now you'll do both. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. I didn't mean it, she whispered. Yes, you did, I said gently. You just didn't mean for it to cost you anything. Dean reappeared in the doorway. So that's it, huh? No second chances? No father-daughter forgiveness arc? I stood slowly. You don't get to ask for grace while holding a knife behind your back. He opened his mouth to argue, but Lily held up her hand. Don't, she said. He's right. Dean scoffed and walked out of the room. I turned to Lily. There's something I want you to know, I said. She looked up, eyes red. I don't hate you. I'm disappointed. I'm heartbroken. But hate? No. That would mean I still expected better. She sobbed then, quiet and shaking, like someone realizing a chapter was closing and the pen wasn't in her hand. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small photo, the one from the scrapbook she gave me when she was 8. The one of us fishing, her smile wide, my nose too big. I'm keeping this, I said. But the house? That belongs to people who need it now. She didn't speak. As I walked toward the door, I glanced back one last time. I hope one day, I said, your children never have to choose between remembering you with love or remembering you with regret. Then I left. And this time, I didn't look back. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house was quiet now, not just in sound, but in spirit. I didn't return right away. Grace told me it would take about 2 weeks to finalize the title transfer, and I didn't want to be around to see them pack up. The thought of watching strangers carry out boxes of memories, photos, things I'd built with Marjorie's laughter in the walls, it was too much. So I stayed with George a little longer. Slept on the spare bed, brewed coffee in a dented old percolator, and spent most mornings on his porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees like a song only old men remember. He didn't ask many questions. Just poured me coffee and handed me the paper. That was his way of saying, I'm here if you need me, but I won't press. I appreciated that more than he knew. The town kept whispering. I'd hear bits of it when I went out to get groceries, 2 women near the cereal aisle speculating about what really happened, a clerk at the hardware store nodding to me like he'd just seen a legend. One afternoon, while walking through the park, I overheard a teenager say, "That's the guy who kicked out his own daughter." I didn't correct him. Let them believe what they wanted. The truth didn't need a spotlight. It just needed peace. And for the first time in years, I had some. It was strange at first, waking up without the sound of kids arguing over cereal, without the muffled footsteps of Lily rushing to work or Dean shouting at some poor soul on the phone. Strange, but not sad. I found myself walking more. Through town. Past the diner Marjorie and I used to go to after church. Through the little cemetery on Maple Street, where her name lived quietly on a granite slab with a carved rose. I sat beside her one morning, the grass still wet with dew. "They're leaving," I said, voice barely louder than the wind. "The house is finally ours again." I pulled a thermos from my bag, coffee, black, the way she drank it, and poured a little into the soil. Our old tradition. I did what you would have done, I whispered. Or at least, I tried to. The wind rustled, gentle and warm. I imagined her hand on my shoulder, the way she'd do when words didn't help. I stayed there a long time. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Emma, my granddaughter, showed up at George's. She stood on the porch, clutching a small notebook, eyes wide and nervous. She looked like Lily at that age, all nerves and curiosity. George opened the door. "You've got a visitor." I stepped out, unsure what to expect. She didn't run to hug me. Didn't cry. Just held out the notebook. "I made this," she said softly. I took it. It was a journal, hand-decorated, filled with small memories, pictures of us baking cookies, drawings of the garden, a list titled "Things I Love About Grandpa." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "I'm sorry," she said, eyes wet. "I didn't know what Mom and Dean were doing. But I want to come back. I want to visit. Just me." I knelt down, a level with her. "You're always welcome," I said. "Always." She smiled, the kind that carries more truth than most words. That visit stayed with me. Because even in the silence, even after all the betrayal, the damage, the grief, love had a way of surviving. Of slipping through cracks, soft and persistent. After Lily and Dean moved out, Grace called to let me know the keys were returned. "They didn't leave a note," she said. "Just dropped them off and walked out." I drove back that evening. The house looked lighter. Emptier, yes, but freer. Like it had taken a breath after holding it for too long. I walked through every room. The living room where we opened Christmas presents. The hallway where Lily took her first steps. The den where Dean once tried to put me on a pull-out couch like an old dog. The house remembered everything. But now, it was ready for something new. I stepped into the garden, or what used to be the garden. The gravel was still there, the soil choked, but I had plans. Big ones. Not just for flowers. But for people. I called Russ the next day, the director of the veterans shelter. "I want to talk," I said. "About making the house ready." He came that afternoon, and we walked the place together. He took notes, nodded a lot, seemed both surprised and moved by how much space there was. "This could house 5 guys easily," he said. "Maybe more with bunk setups." "It's not just beds," I said. "It's dignity." He looked at me, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "We can make that happen," he said. And I believed him. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just trying to survive. I was building again. Not for Lily. Not even for myself. But for people who understood the value of shelter, and what it meant to be offered one not out of pity, but out of respect. We started with the locks. Russ brought a crew of volunteers, a few guys from the shelter, some retired carpenters, even a young woman named Dana who handled all the permit paperwork like she'd been doing it her whole life. The moment the new locks clicked into place, I felt something shift inside me. That was the first act of real ownership I'd felt in years. We didn't bulldoze anything. No massive renovations or grand reveals. This wasn't a makeover show. It was restoration, of purpose, of memory, of dignity. And every nail, every brushstroke, carried the weight of something deeper than charity. It carried justice. The old gravel patch, the one Dean dumped over Marjorie's garden, was cleared out first. I asked Dana if we could turn it back into a real garden. She smiled. "Absolutely. Raised beds will be easier for the older guys to tend anyway." We laid the first boards by hand. That night, I stood where the lavender used to bloom and imagined Marjorie bending down, dirt under her nails, humming something old and sweet. It almost felt like I could hear her again. "You'd like this," I whispered. You'd like them. The men who moved in weren't what people expected. They weren't broken or bitter. They were quiet, respectful. Some with haunted eyes, others with dry humor that reminded me of my factory days. One of them, Harold, brought his own toolbox and fixed the kitchen drawers without anyone asking. Place has good bones, he told me. Just needed the right hands. We painted the bedroom's soft colors. Nothing fancy. Just warm and clean. We replaced the curtains Lily had chosen, stiff and gray, with soft cotton ones that let in light. We bought bunk beds for the larger room upstairs, and I gave up the master bedroom without hesitation. It's too big for me anyway, I said. I'd rather be close to the back door. Every day, someone new showed up to help. A local bakery donated bread twice a week. The high school sent students to help clear the attic. A group of retired nurses stopped by with basic medical supplies and free checkups. Word spread. But not in a loud, attention-seeking way. It spread like a whisper of something good returning to a place that had forgotten what kindness felt like. And me? I came alive again. I wasn't just a man in a chair anymore. I was moving, planning, fixing things with my hands. The kind of tired I felt at the end of each day was the good kind, the kind you earn. One afternoon, while we were sorting clothes in the hallway closet, I found something wedged behind a shelf, a photo. Bent at the edges. Faded. It was Lily, age 6, dressed as a tiny bumblebee. I was crouched beside her, holding her hand, both of us laughing like we didn't have a care in the world. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slipped it into the back pocket of my wallet. Some things still mattered, even when the story changed. Emma came to visit the next week. Russ was showing one of the men how to check the boiler pressure when I heard the knock. She stood on the porch, clutching a basket of cookies and a folded paper. I drew the garden, she said, holding it up. I wanted to remember what it looked like before, you know. Before it changed. I knelt down beside her, heart tight. You got the lavender just right, I said. She beamed. I looked it up. She stayed for dinner. Sat beside Harold, who told her jokes that made her giggle and cover her mouth with both hands. One of the other men, Frank, showed her how to sand an old chair without splinters. She called him Mr. Frank and thanked him like she was raised right. After dinner, she pulled me aside. Do you think Mommy will ever visit? She asked. I paused. Thought carefully. Maybe, I said. When she's ready to see things for what they are. Emma nodded like she understood something most adults don't. Okay, she said. But I like it better now. It feels safer. I hugged her then. Long and quiet. Because she was right. The house did feel safer. Not because of locks or alarms. But because love lived here again, not the kind born of blood, but of choice. Of action. Of respect. Russ called the next morning. You've got a real community here, Walt. You know that? I looked out the window, at the men sitting on the porch drinking coffee, at the lavender starting to sprout, at Emma's drawing pinned to the fridge. I know, I said. For the first time in years, I did. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home. Not because of the people who once claimed it. But because of the people who honored it. And in that, I found something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. Mornings began with laughter now. Not loud or wild, just soft chuckles over burnt toast, the clink of mugs, and the creak of chairs around the old oak table that had once been witness to so many silent meals. The men in the house, Harold, Frank, Tony, and even quiet old Raymond, each had their routines. Some liked coffee first. Some prayed. Some read newspapers from weeks ago like the news would change this time. And me? I sat by the window, sipping tea, watching the light creep across the garden Marjorie once tended. It wasn't blood that brought us together. It was something better. Choice. Every man under this roof had known something about loss, of country, of family, of dignity. And now, we were rebuilding. Together. They helped without being asked. They listened without judging. When I mentioned Marjorie's birthday one morning, Harold made a cake with too much cinnamon, and Raymond picked wildflowers from the side of the road. "Don't tell anyone I got emotional," Raymond grunted, eyes glistening. "I won't if you won't," I said, clapping his shoulder. Week by week, the house transformed. Rooms once filled with tension now held soft music and books. A few of the guys started a chess tournament in the den. Tony built birdhouses and lined them across the fence like a parade of tiny homes. And then came the neighbors. One by one, they started dropping by. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street brought tamales and ended up staying for dinner. The Johnson twins offered to mow the lawn in exchange for a lesson on how to fix their bikes. A young couple from down the road asked if they could volunteer on weekends. "We heard what you're doing here," the woman said. "It's beautiful." It was strange, at first, being seen, not as a burden or a leftover, but as a pillar. One day, I caught myself humming while trimming the hedges. A tune Marjorie used to sing. I stopped, startled by the sound coming from my own lips. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. That Sunday, we hosted a small dinner for the local veteran support group. 20 people showed up, some with walkers, some with children, all with stories that needed space. We cleared the yard, lit lanterns, and served chili in mismatched bowls. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else read a poem. And as the night settled around us, I looked out over that crowd, mismatched, weathered, full of heart, and I realized. This was my family now. Not the one I raised. The one I found. Or maybe, the one that found me. Later that night, while I was folding chairs, I heard the gate creak open. I turned, expecting another guest who'd forgotten something. But it wasn't a stranger. It was Emma. And behind her, hanging back by the gate, was Lily. Emma ran up and hugged me tight. "I helped Mom drive," she said proudly. "We just wanted to see." Lily stood frozen at the gate, unsure if she was welcome. I met her gaze. For a long time. Then I nodded, just once. She stepped forward slowly, taking in the changes, the garden, the lights, the laughter still echoing from inside. "It's beautiful," she said softly. I didn't reply. "I've been following the articles," she continued. "The town wrote about the shelter. People are calling it Marjorie's house." "She earned it," I said. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know I can't undo what happened," she whispered. "But I wanted you to know. I think about it every day." I looked at her, really looked. There were lines on her face I hadn't noticed before. Tension behind her eyes. Regret, maybe. But also humility. "Emma's always welcome," I said. She nodded, quietly accepting the limit in my words. "I'm proud of what you've built," she said. I didn't respond. Because it wasn't just me who built it. We all did. She didn't ask to come in. Just stood beside me for a while, listening to the wind rustle through the garden, the clatter of dishes from inside, the sound of belonging she no longer had claim to. "I'll let you get back," she said, turning to go. Emma gave me one more hug and whispered, "I'll come again next week, okay?" I kissed the top of her head. "You better." As they disappeared down the road, I exhaled. No anger. No triumph. Just release. Later that night, Harold knocked on my door. "Everything all right?" I nodded. "Yeah. Just ghosts." He smiled. "This house can handle a few." And I believed him. Because the people inside it? They weren't perfect. But they were present. And that's more than I could say for the ones who used to live here. It was just after lunch on a Wednesday when she came back. No call. No warning. Just the sound of soft footsteps on the gravel and the knock of hesitation on the front door. I was in the kitchen, drying mugs. Tony had made a mess with the coffee pot again, insisting it was his turn despite the fact he didn't know how to measure anything. I smiled to myself as I wiped the counter, thinking how different the messes were now, harmless, human, easy to forgive. The knock came again. 3 soft taps. Harold glanced toward the door. Expecting anyone? No, I said. But I think I know who it is. I opened the door. Lily stood there. Alone. She looked tired. Smaller than I remembered. Her eyes held something different this time, not defiance, not entitlement, not the carefully constructed coldness she wore during our last encounter. Just stillness. Hi, Dad. I nodded, holding the door open but not stepping aside. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said quickly. I've been thinking about the way I left things. I waited. She held something in her hand, a small envelope, unsealed, bent at one corner. This is for you, she said. It's not much. Just some words I should have said years ago. I took it, didn't open it. She looked past me into the house. She saw the clean hall, the soft laughter from the den, the smell of something baking. It feels different, she said. It is. She nodded. I came by last week when Emma was here, she said. I didn't come in. I just sat at the gate. Watched for a while. Why? I don't know, she admitted. I guess. I wanted to see what it looks like when people take care of each other the right way. That stung, even though she meant it kindly. She looked down at her hands. I made mistakes, she said. I let things get out of control. I justified things that were never justifiable. And worst of all, I forgot who you were. Still, I said nothing. I let the words hang between us. She looked up again, eyes glassy. You didn't deserve what I did to you. What we did. I thought I had time to fix it. Thought maybe one day, I'd get over my pride and say sorry. She took a breath. I'm saying it now. I'm sorry, Dad. I looked at her then. I saw the girl she used to be, the one who fell asleep in my lap during thunderstorms, who danced with Marjorie in the kitchen, who once whispered, "You're my favorite person, Papa." And I saw the woman she had become, proud, damaged, trying. Trying now. Too late for what once was. But maybe not too late for something smaller. Something quiet. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. We stood there, side by side, staring out at the garden. The lavender had started to bloom again. You said you're not here to ask for anything, I said. I'm not. I turned to her. Then I'll offer something. She looked confused. Not a second chance, I said. Not a seat at the table. But maybe a place to sit, once in a while. Outside, near the garden. She nodded, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. I'd like that, she whispered. We stood there a while longer. No embrace. No dramatic apology. Just the sun warming the porch, the smell of soil and lavender, and the space between us, no longer a canyon, but not yet a bridge. She placed a hand briefly on the porch rail, the way Marjorie used to, and gave me a faint smile. I'll let you get back. She turned to go. I watched her walk to the gate. Before she reached it, she paused. Dad? She asked without turning around. Yes? I hope one day, you can forgive me. I looked at her back, framed by sunlight and shadows. I already did, I said. But that doesn't mean I'll forget. She nodded, quiet acceptance in her posture, and walked away. I stood on the porch a little longer, holding the envelope she'd left. Later that night, when the house was still, I opened it. Inside was a note. Short. Messy. I lost myself somewhere between survival and selfishness. But I never stopped loving you. I just stopped remembering how to show it. If Emma ever asks, please tell her I tried. I folded it and tucked it into the back of the old scrapbook she made for me when she was 8. Not because I wanted to dwell on it. But because one day, Emma might want to know the whole story. And when she did, I'd tell her the truth, that family is not about never failing. It's about who shows up when the dust settles. And who stays after the damage is done. Do you think the daughter truly regrets what she did? Comment your thoughts below. The ceremony wasn't grand. No balloons, no ribbon cutting with big scissors. Just a few folding chairs under the oak tree, some fresh paint on the porch, and a new wooden sign above the front door that read, Marjorie's house. Russ made it himself, carved the letters by hand, stained the wood a warm chestnut. When he hung it that morning, we all stood back in silence, watching it sway gently in the breeze. She'd like this, I said quietly. She'd be proud, Harold added. It felt strange, at first, seeing her name up there for the world to see. She was never one for attention. But this wasn't attention. It was honor. People came. Not in droves, but steadily, neighbors, veterans, volunteers, even the mayor, who gave a short speech about community and compassion. I barely heard it. My eyes kept drifting to the faces of the men living in the house, the ones who had taken a crumbling home and rebuilt it with dignity. Frank wore his old military jacket, the sleeves patched but clean. Tony had shaved. Even Raymond put on a tie, which none of us knew he even owned. I sat in the front row, Marjorie's old locket in my pocket, Emma at my side holding my hand. She wore a dress with little sunflowers and a homemade bracelet made of yarn. Before the speeches began, she leaned over and whispered, "Do you think Grandma knows?" I smiled. I think she's been watching the whole time. After the ceremony, people filtered through the house, admiring the fresh paint, the homemade furniture, the wall of donated books we'd built in what used to be the living room. The back porch had been converted into a small sunroom, with rocking chairs and potted plants that now bloomed in Marjorie's honor. And in the center of the garden stood a plaque, small, simple, honest. For Marjorie. A home for the forgotten, built from love. One of the younger volunteers took a photo of me standing beside it. I didn't pose. Just stood quietly, hands behind my back, head bowed. That photo made the local paper the next day. They called it, "The Man Who Gave His House to Hope." But they got it wrong. I didn't give it away. I gave it back, to the people who needed it, to the community it was always meant for, and maybe most of all, to her. Marjorie. After everyone left, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea. The house behind me buzzed with quiet activity, laughter in the hallway, music from the den, the shuffle of footsteps that felt familiar now. Home sounds. I thought back to the first nail I ever hammered into these walls. I was 26, fresh from the army, wide-eyed and eager. Marjorie stood beside me, pregnant with Lily, holding a roll of blueprints and laughing at my crooked shelves. She used to say, "We're not building a house. We're building a place to come back to." And she was right. This place had seen every version of me, the young father, the grieving husband, the proud grandfather, the forgotten old man. And now, something new. A steward. Not an owner. Not anymore. But a caretaker of a legacy bigger than blood. Emma came out after a while, curling into the chair beside me, barefoot and sun-kissed. "Do you think I can live here when I'm older?" she asked. You can live anywhere you want, I said. But you'll always have a place here. She nodded, resting her head on my arm. Do you miss her? She asked. Every day. I miss her too. Even though I didn't know her. You know her better than you think, I said. You've got her eyes. She smiled. A little while later, Lily arrived, just her. She didn't come in, didn't speak to anyone else. Just stood at the gate for a long time before quietly walking into the garden. I watched her place a single rose beside the plaque, then step back, hands folded. She didn't ask to come in. And I didn't invite her. Some moments are better left untouched. When the sun began to dip below the trees, casting golden light across the porch, I stood slowly and looked around. The house was full again. But not crowded. Not tense. Not heavy with unspoken debts. Just full. Full of people who respected one another. Full of the kind of silence that heals rather than wounds. Full of intention. I thought about all the things I could have done differently. The ways I'd failed. The times I stayed silent when I should have spoken. But regret didn't live here anymore. Only purpose. I walked into the kitchen, now freshly painted and smelling faintly of lemon and old wood, and poured myself one last cup of tea. I raised it quietly to the ceiling, to the garden, to the locket in my pocket. To you, Marjorie, I said. The house is alive again. And I swear, somewhere between the hum of conversation and the distant chirp of crickets, I heard her say, "Welcome home."